the
Okay, just leave computer audio.
but that leaves the computer.
Yeah. Launch a test.
Okay, yeah, so they can hear me
Yep.
online as well.
Yeah.
That connects online.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
There you go.
Good morning, Ruth. We're all proud of Patrick's success at Georgia Tech.
Hey, George.
Good morning, Larry. How are you?
Hey, good. I wasn't sure. I kept looking for an email notification. Did you get a notification of the meeting today?
I did.
You
I got
did.
it by email.
When did it come?
Either Wednesday or Thursday. I don't have my phone right here with me.
I searched my email. I couldn't find it. I just by faith logged in.
Well, we've got a good speaker. He's spoken to us a couple times.
Is that Mr. Paul?
That's Patrick, Paul's grandson.
Oh, yeah. I remember when he spoke to us previously. Very, very impressive.
Very impressive.
Good morning, Ruth. I don't know you as well as I do George.
Ruth is an incognito.
Yeah. But she can always turn her picture off the same if she wants to. I'm going to turn my picture off so I can.
Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
It's great to see everybody. Got a nice crowd this morning. Welcome. Welcome to our friends on Zoom. And Miss Marston, nice to see you. Let's open with a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, as we enter this Advent season, we ask that you provide help, comfort, leadership as we deal with major struggles in Ukraine and the Middle East. Far too much suffering going on. Help us to sort all this out. We give thanks for young minds making strides going forward. And we give thanks for the opportunity of our group to join in fellowship each week. Watch over those who can't be with us today. Amen. Let's see, announcements. Mac, I know you had one.
For those of you who are interested in Cuba, we'll be starting a new session this Sunday. Alex Irwin, a week from now, is going to do it. And this Sunday, I'm going to be the opening act for him, talking about the twists and turns of the U.S. history, which some of us in here lived through. Anyway, join us for a session on Cuba.
All right. Jim.
We are not meeting on December 29th, and December 22nd, we may or may not meet. I'm going to clarify that for you. But if we do meet, we're going to do the caroling that has been done in the past that I'm not familiar with, but I'll clarify with Bert and Scott. And if there's anybody who, if we do meet, would like to introduce a Christmas carol, and before we perform 5 or 6 carols, please let me know. And we're going to check with one person to see if he's going to join us. There was some confusion over whether the church wanted us to meet on December 22nd. So I'll clarify that, and I'll let you all know by the next meeting. We'll know whether December 22nd is going to meet. All right.
All right. Thank you, Jim. Speaking of meetings, Scott, you want to tell us who's presenting next week?
Yeah, next week, Ann Blitch and Esther Stokes will be here. They were part of the committee that put on that big Saturday event where we had opportunity for people to get their records cleaned up. And, you know, we had all kinds of lawyers here and 300 volunteers, and everything was a big deal, big day. And so Esther and Ann will be here to talk about what went into that and what are the next steps in those efforts.
Great. Thank you. I'll remind everybody this Sunday is the Christmas market. It's only on one Sunday. And so this is your opportunity to come out and get some early shopping done.
Do you,
John McCrae? Oh, special guests. We have a new attendee today, Richard O'Donnell. Richard, why don't you stand up? Richard's been a member for a while. He and his wife have a daughter. And Richard's on the finance committee, the investment committee, and is quite active. And he's lowering the average age today quite a bit. So welcome. Any other announcements? Oh, another special guest, I'm sorry. JP Marston is here. People may remember JP has spoken to us at least twice, I think, in the past. Twice, yeah. Once on Bitcoin and once on.
Works.
I can't remember the other one. Oh, both times. Okay. I'm going to turn the floor over to Paul Marston, who's going to introduce our speaker today.
One thing I'm conscious of is that you don't want to listen to me. So I intend to make this very short. But I see by the heading on the screen behind me that I'm already too long. So, I am extremely proud of my grandson. Here he is. Best introduction I ever heard.
Paul Malston is his grandson that's talking today. He spent more time telling us that we didn't want to listen to him, and he wasn't going to
Hey,
have a
on
long
the Zoom.
introduction than he did on that.
Okay.
Sweet, thank you. Yeah, thank you for the introduction. It's great to be speaking here again. I spoke about 3 years ago at the beginning of 2021 when it was all virtual. So it's nice to be speaking in person. Yeah, I was trying to think of a good theme for this talk, and I recalled a conversation I had with my grandfather saying that there's about a 60-year age difference between us and how long of a time that is, thinking about how much can happen in 60 years. For me, just thinking how much has happened in the 3 years since I last spoke to you all. And I thought it was funny because a couple of days later, I had a conversation with a friend talking about how a millisecond is a long time. And so I think we can all imagine how 60 years is a long time. But today, I'd like to talk about the world of computer science that I know and how in that world, a millisecond can also be a long time. So a little bit of background about myself. I'm a senior at Georgia Tech studying computer science. I focus on studying operating systems and computer architecture. So things like how the computer manages all the programs that are running on it and how it interacts with the hardware to run more efficiently. I've really enjoyed my time at Georgia Tech. They give us so many opportunities. I think there's over 500 clubs, about 20% is involved in Greek life, so many different diverse opportunities. And so today I'd like to talk about a few of those opportunities that I've had. One of those opportunities is a club that I'm involved with that is dedicated to learning how high performance computing and supercomputing works. And so at Georgia Tech, we have a very powerful supercomputer. It's one of the most powerful in the country. And nice, okay. So a little background on how supercomputing works. I hope everybody can see this diagram okay. So a supercomputer is, I think, what most people would expect. It's a computer that can run things super fast. And the way that works is by essentially combining the processing power of multiple computers. So you take an individual computer, hook it up to thousands of other computers, and run programs across all of those at once. And the way that works is it is set up like the one shown here. So you have a login node. Each of the computers in the system is called a node. And you have a login node that gives you access to the system. And then you have a bunch of nodes, which are the ones shown in the center of this screen, that form the computing cluster. And each of those nodes is running dedicated software that can communicate with all of the other nodes in the system to share the work. So essentially, the performance of a supercomputer is in sharing the work between a bunch of smaller computers. And so my role in this club at Georgia Tech is to take programs that require a lot of computation and get them to run in an environment like this. And so specifically, here are some of the stats of the supercomputer at Georgia Tech. It's called the Phoenix system. It has 31,104 cores. For context, this laptop right here has 16. So it's about 2,000 times more powerful. And that number that you see on the far right, I think that's pretty hard to see, but it's 2,600,000. That is the number of floating point operations that the supercomputer can run per second, times a billion. So a floating point operation is essentially an arithmetic operation, like adding two numbers. And so what this is saying is it can do 2 million billion arithmetic operations per second, is how fast that computer can run. So why would you even want a computer that can run that fast? Like, what are we running on it? Running applications like this program on the bottom, which is called GROMACS. It's a molecular biology simulation that allows you to simulate proteins and how they form at the molecular level. And it takes so much computation power because it's simulating literal atoms. That's what's shown, atoms and molecules in that diagram on the bottom. And I don't know anything about molecular biology. So I don't really know how it works, but I know that it runs really fast and I know how to make it run fast. And so that's what we study, is how to get programs that we don't even understand to run fast so that the researchers who do understand it can get the results. So I don't want to spend too much time on this because it is, like I said, a pretty technical subject, but I do want to talk about the process of just high level, how do you build an application to take advantage of the fact that it's running on a supercomputer. So the first step is to take a problem that you have and then divide it into different parts so that you can run it on the different computers. So if we go back to this diagram, we have a bunch of different computers that we'd like to run on. And so we need to split up our problem into different parts so that we can run each part individually at the same time. So for example, let's say you want to add up 1 million numbers. You could do that sequentially. You could add them one by one, kind of like you would just as a human doing it. Or you could split it up into 1,000 different computations and add up 1,000 numbers 1,000 times and combine all the results at the end. And that's essentially how a supercomputer works, by dividing a problem, splitting it up into a bunch of different parts, and then combining the results at the end. And so this gets you your extreme performance of running billions of computations per second. And I find it very interesting to get to work on a supercomputer like that. I feel very privileged to have access to it because usually it would cost thousands of dollars to run any application on, and I get to use it for free. I was just working on it yesterday. So I think that's a huge benefit that a school like Georgia Tech can provide. So I want to move on to another very cool program that I'm involved with, which I talked about 3 years ago in my talk, but I was very in the early stages of that, which is the Yellow Jacket Space Program. So the Yellow Jacket Space Program is a club at Georgia Tech dedicated to building liquid-fueled rocketry. So we make the rocket from scratch pretty much, and then we fly it. Last year, or 3 years ago when I talked, we were just creating our first rocket, and we were planning on launching in 2022. We ended up launching in 2023, at the beginning of 2023, this year. And so here's some pictures of that. On the right is going off of our launch rail. On the left is showing it when it's a couple thousand feet high. So this was a pretty exciting launch. We went out to the desert, California to launch this. I personally didn't go, but it was very cool to see. And we got a lot of great data from that. And so right now we're working on a second rocket that's even bigger. And that's the specifications on the bottom left here are for that bigger rocket. So it's supposed to go 123,000 feet, which is about a third of the way to space. And supposed to be about 23 feet long. If anyone here knows anything about rocketry, the other stats might be interesting to you. Otherwise, they're probably not interesting. But yeah, so it's a very neat club. We design the entire rocket from scratch, all the software, all the hardware, all the electronics, even the propulsion system is built entirely by students from scratch. And my current role in the team is software lead. I've been the software lead for the past year and a half. And yeah, it's been an amazing experience. And so I'd like to talk about some of the work that goes on and what I do as software lead. I think there's really two components to that. One is the leadership aspect of that. And then one is the technical side of it, doing the software. On the leadership side, it's been a very interesting experience because it's a student club. The oldest people in the club are my age, 22. The youngest people are 17, 18, and we're trying to build a very complex system. And so we're asking people to learn very complex topics when they have, at most 3 to 4 years of experience. And so balancing that is a very fun challenge. But it's been a great experience, and I'm hopeful. I won't be there to see it because I'm graduating soon, but I'm hopeful the next vehicle will launch successfully. We'll have a good mission. And on the technical side of things, I think when I say I do software for a rocket, a lot of people think that means doing guidance, navigation, controlling where the rocket goes. Unfortunately, we don't do that. So a propulsion system plus a guidance system is a missile. And as a college club, we're not allowed to make missiles. So we don't do the guidance part of it. We just go straight up and then come straight back down, hopefully. But we still need a lot of software. So there's two main components of the software that we do. One is controlling the engine. So our engine is a liquid oxygen, kerosene, pressure-fed system. None of that really matters except for the fact that it's pressure-fed, which means that we need to control pressure carefully to get the right engine characteristics, to burn the right amount of fuel. And the pressure is controlled by our software system that opens and closes valves very quickly to regulate how much pressure is in the rocket. And the other main part of the software system that we do is collecting data. So when we do a launch, it's great to see it go, but the real point of doing the launch is to get meaningful data, see how our engine performed, see how high we went, get proof that we hit all of our targets. And so it's super important to collect data. And collecting data, it's important to be fast. So how fast do we need to be? Here's a graph that we took. This is a result from the first launch that we did a year ago. This shows the current. So we measure voltages and currents in the system. This shows the current on our 24 volts and 5 volt power lines in the rocket over time during our launch. And there's a couple interesting things from this graph that make it pretty neat. One, you can see it starts out pretty low, and then there's a huge spike right around 23 seconds, and then another minor spike right around 38 seconds. And so looking back at this data, we were really happy to see this because at 23 seconds, our parachute deployed. And our parachute deployment consists of essentially a mini explosion, and that takes a bunch of power. And so we would expect to see a current spike. And at 35 seconds, our secondary chute deploys, or it's supposed to. And so this confirms that because we see another spike in the current. But you'll notice those spikes, especially the first one, are very brief. It's a very short interval, actually just a couple milliseconds. And so if we're sampling our data, say every second, we collect a data point of our current once per second, it's entirely possible we'll just miss that spike. And then we'll just see a flat line when we look at our data. which would be really disappointing. We would get no meaningful information. We wouldn't be able to say anything. But if we sample data fast enough, like here, we get these really cool graphs that tell us a lot of information. And so a lot of what I do on the Yellow Jacket Space Program is making sure that we can sample data fast enough to get meaningful results. And the main data that we have to sample quickly is not actually current, it's propulsion data. So things like pressure in all of the tanks. And the propulsion team has told us that they would like to be able to sample data 200 times a second. So 200 times a second is very fast. That's once every 5 milliseconds. And how do we do that? So very similarly to what I need to do with the high performance computing and supercomputers, need to look at the hardware and take advantage of the hardware that we're using to get better performance. So on the left here, I have a little diagram of the hardware setup that we have. We essentially have one controller, which is like a mini computer connected to 4 different ADCs, analog to digital converters. And those ADCs are connected to different sensors. The sensors give raw like electrical signals as outputs. And so the ADCs are used to convert that into something the computer can understand. And then the controller will read those values and store them for later. And so one approach to getting all the data from the sensors is to go through each ADC and then just go through each sensor in all of the ADCs. And so that's a pretty natural way to do it. So, starting maybe on the bottom right ADC, we'll just read one sensor value, then read the next one, so on. And then finally, go to like the bottom left ADC and just loop our way around. There's a problem with that though, which is that whenever you read a value from one ADC, you have to wait 500 microseconds. So now we're talking microseconds. A microsecond is 1/1,000,000th of a second. A millisecond is 1,000th of a second. So now we're talking microseconds, way faster. Seems like that's not a problem. Delaying 500 microseconds is not human noticeable, would never cause any issues, but it does. So if we try that approach, for every ADC, we're going to read 5 sensors. We have to delay 5 times. So 5 times 500 microseconds is 2.5 milliseconds. And then we do that 4 times. Now we've delayed for 10 milliseconds. So every time we want to collect data, we've wasted 10 milliseconds of time. And now we're not hitting our required frequency for the propulsion team. So a better way to do it is to take advantage of the hardware and the fact that we can sample from different ADCs in parallel. So if we read one sensor value from all 4 ADCs at once, then we move on to the next sensor 500 microseconds later. We can do that 5 times. And now we only have to wait for 2.5 milliseconds total, which is under our 5 millisecond goal that the propulsion team wants us to do. And so this is something we've been working on the past few weeks, trying to get proper data collection. And we tested it a couple of weeks ago. It works great, getting data fast enough. And I think it's really fascinating to think about, because 3 years ago, I would have saw a delay of 500 microseconds. First asked, how long is a microsecond? And then said, why would you ever care about that? That's so small. But in this case, it really does make a difference. And now you might be wondering, can you go faster than 500 microseconds? Are there problems that involve speeds even faster than that? And there are. So one chance that I got to do is intern at a finance company last summer, and they work in the automated and algorithmic trading space. And in that area, 500 microseconds is a very long time. Makes a millisecond look like an eternity. So I'd like to talk about that next. But first, kind of an overview of how algorithmic trading works at a really, really simple level, because I do the software side, not the finance side. So just give a really, really basic overview. There's 3 main parts. There you have an application side, which is where traders might interact with the system, setting, configuring things and running manual trades, and also viewing all the trades that are going on. You have a server in the middle, trading server, that takes in a bunch of market data, so all the current prices of things, and runs it through some trading algorithms, and then makes orders automatically. and those orders are sent to a trading exchange like NYSE, NASDAQ, where they're fulfilled. And then the exchange sends data back to the trading servers so that they can process more and send out more trades. And so speed here matters for two reasons. One is a competitive advantage. If two companies are making trades at the same time, whoever goes through first gets priority. So if the trades are for the same price, the one that gets there first is the one that goes through. Second reason speed matters is because you want to be able to quickly react to events. If you have an order out on the market and something happens, stock price falls, you want to be able to quickly rescind that order so it doesn't get fulfilled for some very bad price that you no longer care about. So there's two important aspects where speed is really crucial here. But how fast are we talking about? Well, these systems run so fast that the exchange and the server, their physical locations matter. And so they're being physically located together, for example, in the same data center, because the speed of light to transfer information from, let's say, two states is too long. So we're talking now nanoseconds, which is 1/billionth of a second, and trying to save every nanosecond possible between when a server makes an order and the exchange can fulfill that order. There's a couple consequences of running at that speed. One, it creates really cool technical problems, which is why I like it. I love solving those problems. And two, it creates other problems. So a few incidents over the past few years. A company called Knight Capital lost $440 million in the first 2 hours of a trading day once because of a single software glitch. Because when you're running automated trading algorithms at that speed and you have a problem, things go wrong very, very quickly. And you can end up losing a lot of money very, very quickly. And so in this case, the Knight Capital case, it was largely isolated to Knight Capital. They lost their own money. But in other cases, it does affect the market as a whole. For example, the flash crash of 2010, where the Dow Jones dropped almost 10% in about 16 minutes and then immediately bounced up. And that drop had nothing to do with the actual market value of any of the stocks or futures. It was just software related, plus a little bit of lying by one of the trading participants. And so, that's a very bad thing if you have that much market volatility due to software errors. And then you could also have just human error, or just rogue people trading $570 million worth of oil futures after drinking, which shouldn't be allowed to happen. So the commonality between all three of these events is that they really shouldn't have been allowed to happen. And that is where the company that I interned with over the summer and that I'll be going back to full time steps in. So they look at the RMS, the risk management system, part of the trading system that's very important and becoming even more important in the last decade. So the risk management system is designed to prevent scenarios like the one on the previous slide from happening. And it does a lot of things. At the simplest level, it prevents mistakes like adding an extra zero to the price. If you're trying to buy something for $100, you don't want to say that you're willing to pay $1,000 for it. And so you want to have automated checks to make sure that doesn't happen. And the company I interned with, called Hyannisport Research, has a piece of hardware that can do 85 different risk checks in about 340 nanoseconds. So to me, at least, hearing 340 nanoseconds, I have no intuitive understanding of how long that is. That makes no sense to me. I can't imagine how long that is. So to give a little context, that's about how long it takes light to travel across a football field. So the delay between seeing something happen on one end of a football field and you, a spectator, seeing it on the other, is how long it takes to do 85 of these risk checks, which you would never notice. It's humanly imperceptible, that kind of delay. And so I find it fascinating to get to work on a system where speed matters that much and is so important. And yeah, it's just a really cool experience. It's why I'm going back there to work there full time, because I love working with those systems and solving problems. I'd love to talk a little more about technically, how they achieve those speeds. I can't really do that because I didn't run this talk by them and they're very sensitive about it. But similar to the work I did on the Yellow Jacket space program and with the high performance computing at Georgia Tech, it involves taking advantage of very dedicated hardware and writing software that is aware of how that hardware works to get much faster speeds. So talked about high performance computing, talked about the Yellow Jacket space program, talked about trading. And I think as we went through those, got a little bit faster, right? Started talking about how many operations can we do per second on a supercomputer, then talking about how can we save milliseconds on a sensor system on the Yellow Jacket space program. And now talking about trading, how can we save nanoseconds and perform risk checks to save millions of dollars about as fast as the speed of light. So I hope that that is a good overview and has showed how a millisecond in a case like this can be a very, very long time, because in a millisecond, you can do about 2,900 risk checks. And so saying, oh, we have a problem, we just lost a millisecond of our time, usually no problem. Here, massive multi-million-dollar problem. Sweet, thank you.
Let me ask for those who have questions, let us get you a mic so our Zoom friends can hear.
Yeah, Paul, that was very interesting. I'm adolescent mindset here, so I didn't quite understand. That's stretching it. I didn't understand at all, about your mathematical stuff. But the launching part is fascinating. Where do you launch, and does the FAA have any involvement in giving you permission to do that?
Absolutely, yes. So we launch at a site called FAR, or the Friends of Amateur Rocketry. It's a huge area in the desert that's sort of rented out to groups like us that we can pay to be there for a day, and we get aerospace clearance to launch to certain altitudes by the FAA in that area.
So you don't launch from Grant Field?
No, we don't. We've done a few tests out in Georgia, just on some farms. Although now we scared some horses at the last one with the engine, so I think we'll have to find a new place. But we definitely do not launch anywhere near people.
That's just absolutely fascinating. Who else?
Talking about the speeds of the Phoenix system and what you're doing in the trading, it seems like right now, commercially feasible quantum computing is still pretty elusive out in the world. How much faster is that than what you guys are doing now, even at Phoenix?
That's a great question. So for certain problems, it's much, much faster, thousands of times faster than even the fastest supercomputers out there right now, theoretically. But it's much, much harder to develop programs for, much harder to program for, and much harder to get reliable results. And so that's a big problem right now with quantum computing, is getting it to run reliably without quantum errors, essentially.
Yeah.
But when it does work, there will be very specialized problems that can be solved thousands of times faster.
And if you had to guess, how far are we away from that?
If I had to guess, I'd say, honestly, a long time. Yeah, a couple decades, just because there's a lot of work that needs to be done and a lot of research, and it's hard to do that research without a real working system because there's no large scale functional quantum computer right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks.
And let me correct something real quick. A couple of people have called our speaker Paul. His name is Patrick, and that is an error on my part. In the blurb, I put Paul. So it's Patrick Zelinsky. Charlie Jones.
That was terrific, Patrick. I just finished Elon Musk's book, and really incredible. I would recommend it to anybody that's willing to go through 700 pages. Most of it is about SpaceX. He talks about Tesla or the author, Walter Asanoff, talks about Tesla. My question for you is, with what he's doing at SpaceX, were you all able to take any of that into consideration in what you're doing? And if not, what is unique about what you're doing with your rocket? And my second question is, going to supercomputing, is the advent of AI, how much of it is dependent on supercomputing and how much of it is dependent on the software that drives it?
Great questions. To answer your first one, about 15% of the Yellow Jacket space program has interned at space companies, a lot of them at SpaceX. And so we definitely do take a lot of ideas from SpaceX and a lot of their standards we try to apply to our rocket. So I think our hardware lead that designs all of our printed circuit boards, all of our electronic systems, interned at SpaceX the last 2 years. And so he goes, works, learns over the summer, brings back the ideas and develops these amazing pieces of hardware from scratch, just using the knowledge that he's learned. So it's great to work with those people. We absolutely do take ideas from SpaceX, but we're also different. I would say the main difference is the constraints that we have. So like I said, we have our oldest people on the team are 22. Most experienced people have 4 years of experience. We have a very limited budget. And also we don't have a large agency legally backing us. So we can't really afford to, say, launch in different areas. We can only launch at sites like the Friends of Amateur Rocketry. And so I think those constraints are challenging to work around, but also lead to some innovative and like cost saving ideas. And to answer your second question, which was about AI and supercomputing. So AI, most of the AI models are running on, again, dedicated hardware, which is in a way similar to supercomputers and like the supercomputer at Georgia Tech, but is slightly different in that it's mainly dedicated specifically for AI. So companies like NVIDIA, which previously made a lot of graphics cards, turns out that that same kind of hardware is very useful for doing machine learning algorithms and AI models. And most of those models are being trained on GPUs and dedicated hardware for AI models, but they're combined in very similar ways to the supercomputer I talked about. So just like you link up a bunch of computers, you link up a bunch of graphics cards or dedicated AI compute modules and share the computation among those. And there definitely is a lot of software work that goes on there, but the main driving force right now is really just more compute, more power, more training time of these models, just kind of growing how fast the models can learn and how capable they are.
Terry Jenkins.
Patrick, as an adjunct to what Charlie just mentioned and what you said, we've heard a lot of discussion in the last few months about artificial intelligence. I'm confused by the things I hear. Is that the AI, is that something that we should look at as a threat and should be concerned about, or something that we should be proud of?
Definitely something to be proud of. I think it's a threat in the same way that the internet is a threat. It definitely is a disruptor, but it's not a replacer. So it's more of a tool than a threat, and I think it's an amazing tool. I don't know if any of you all have gotten the chance to work with things like ChatGPT and try out AI and language models like that. But it's great to be able to use an artificial intelligence to augment the work that you're doing. And I think that is where we'll see it heading in the future, is as an augmentation of normal work rather than, say, a threat to replace a lot of tasks. It will certainly displace a lot of people, right? A lot of programmers are worried about that, say AI models writing all of their code. And certainly it can do some of that, but no, I don't see it as a threat. And it's definitely something to be proud of. A lot of math research, a lot of computer science research, a lot of hardware research has gone into the latest AI developments, which is awesome to see. Great question. The budget, we typically have around 200,000 a year. That usually comes from a mix of sponsors as well as the student government gives funding to groups like us. So we get a small amount from the student government, and then we have sponsors either giving us funds directly or giving us hardware. And hardware in our case is actually the main thing. So we require a lot of parts, a lot of mechanical parts that are very expensive, a lot of sensors that are very expensive. And so a lot of our sponsors are engineering companies, manufacturing companies that can give us these materials, even just raw materials like raw metal to make our tanks out of. And that saves us a lot of money. To give context, probably saves a couple 100,000 a year just in raw materials like that, like all the parts we need to machine the engine. Yeah.
Tony.
So Patrick, let me ask you a question about these speeds and the human brain, or how fast biological systems operate, or how fast electrons move down a silver wire. This is not a fair question necessarily, and I don't know enough about these subjects to parse it and make it more practical. But I'm looking for a way of relating these speeds to a biological system or the nervous system or electron conduction.
Sure. Yeah, that is a very hard thing to do because quantifying how powerful the human brain is a very tricky thing. Computationally, the supercomputer at Georgia Tech is more powerful than a human brain by an order of magnitude. So I think the human brain can do, it's either the equivalent of a teraflop or a petaflop per second. And the supercomputer at Georgia Tech surpasses that. But you wouldn't say it's necessarily smarter than the human brain. It just has more raw performance, right? You could not do even 1,000 additions per second mentally, whereas a computer easily could. But the brain is configured very differently than a machine is. And so, you know, I'd say any person is much smarter than a supercomputer. It just doesn't have the raw computing performance and calculation ability.
I'm with you. So are you aware of any system in a biological system where parallel computations are done simultaneously? Does that exist in the human brain or any mammalian brain? Parallel circuits for speed?
I am not aware of any organism that can do that. I think certainly there's different stuff going on, right? You can have different trains of thought going on, but you couldn't say do computations simultaneously like a computer could. Generally, you stick to one train of thought at once. Yeah.
Thank you.
Charlie, hang on one sec, Charlie.
How do these speeds compare to the speed
Wait,
of light?
Charlie.
Yeah, great question. So the speed of light is 3 times 10 to the 8th meters per second. So that's you know, a billion meters per second, almost about a third of that, and takes about 3 nanoseconds to travel a meter. And so when I was talking about nanoseconds at the trading infrastructure, you know, every nanosecond light is traveling about 3 meters, and that means every microsecond it's traveling a couple kilometers. So in the time that we can read some sensor values on the Yellow Jacket space program, it's traveling a couple kilometers, and then times that by 1,000, so a couple thousand kilometers for every millisecond.
Bill.
Thank you. Regarding the rocket that you launch, how do you transport it from where you build it to the desert where it's launched? And how much does it weigh?
Great question. We transport it in a trailer. So we own two trailers, one that we actually use at the testing site as sort of an enclosure that we can sit in if it's raining, because it's just the desert. And then we have another one that we use to ship all of our things in. And yeah, so just attach it to the back of a truck, drive it across the country for 3 days. Luckily, I didn't have to be on that team that drove it across the country. They didn't have a lot of fun, but yeah. And then how much does it weigh? So it weighs, the new vehicle will weigh about 600 pounds. So yeah, wet mass 297 kilograms, which is just about 600 pounds, a little over 600 pounds. That is the combined dry mass. So the vehicle itself plus all of the fuel. The vehicle itself, like just the airframe and all of the like electrical components, all of the plumbing inside of it is 162 kilograms. So that's about 340 pounds.
Patrick, let me ask you, I thought your comment was interesting. A rocket with a guidance system is a missile. How hard would it be to add a guidance system for you guys?
Not too difficult. So you can add a pretty simple guidance system just by adding fins to the bottom of the rocket and then controlling those fins. It's just adding some way to maneuver them, gets you a decent amount of control. And so we could probably steer it roughly to a certain area if we wanted to. And it wouldn't be flying like a missile, but we could control roughly where it landed, which is problematic enough. Yeah.
Well, Patrick, congratulations on your retirement from Georgia Tech, and thank you for coming. And we hope you'll come back in a couple of years when we got quantum computing up and running, and you can tell us what that is and thoroughly confound Reynolds again. So thank you, Patrick, and we'll see you all next week.